Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving straight into something pretty common in relationships, actually.
Yeah.
Something you might recognize, whether you put a name to it or not. We're talking about the fear of abandonment.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We're going to be exploring this using a source you shared, Michelle Skeen's book, Love Me, Don't Leave Me. It's really insightful stuff.
It is.
And our goal here is, well, to try and unpack this deep-seated fear.
Yeah.
See if we can maybe identify some paths towards, healthier connections.
It's so true, though. This fear, it can be like a constant hum in the background, or maybe it just sort of subtly shifts how you interact with people. It touches so many of us.
Exactly. And what's great about Skeen's book, as some of the endorsements highlight people like Lissa Lorbaum, is that it offers a path through
Right.
through these really deep anxieties. It's about understanding ourselves better, which then, hopefully, allows for some real change in how we approach love.
hmm And it's not just Lissa. You've got Rebecca Williams, Randy Gunther, Sean Smith, a whole roster of experts saying how well Skeen handles this tricky emotional stuff. Very compassionately, too.
Yeah, that comes across.
And at its core, the book isn't really about trying to change other people, is it?
No, not at all.
It's more this journey inward, self-discovery. Understanding yourself leads to those shifts in relationships.
And right off the bat, Skeen asks some really penetrating questions. Questions that I think could really make you pause and think.
Yeah, like what?
Like, do you feel you have to be absolutely perfect to avoid rejection?
Oof. Yeah.
Or do you ever find yourself maybe putting up with treatment that isn't great, just because being alone feels worse?
Right. Or hiding parts of yourself, that feeling of, if they really knew me.
Exactly. That fear of not being good enough deep down. These are really powerful starting points for thinking about your own patterns.
Absolutely. They get you examining things you might not even be fully conscious of.
And she goes on asking things like, do you get that spike of anxiety if a text isn't answered right away?
Oh, definitely. That resonates with a lot of people.
Or do you notice yourself getting kind of clingy if you sense someone pulling back? Or maybe the opposite, you leave first, just to avoid being left.
Yeah, that preemptive stripe.
And it's not just romance, right?
Yeah.
She talks about using distractions too, like overworking or
Numbing behaviors, yeah. Anything to avoid facing that underlying fear.
that's such a key point. And the distress when someone close is just absent, even for a bit.
Or staying stuck in relationships that aren't healthy because being alone feels, well, terrifying.
It's a big indicator, isn't
It
it?
really is.
Yeah.
These are all signs this fear might be playing a role.
Or even just avoiding relationships entirely because the thought of eventually being left is just too much.
It's a tough cycle.
Yeah.
And, as we get into this, it's important for listeners to know this isn't about quick fixes.
Right. No magic wands.
No. It's about exploring where this fear comes from, how it shows up, and introducing some initial ideas from the book that genuinely offer hope for change, for real growth.
Okay, so let's start digging into where this fear often comes from. Skeen suggests it's usually a mix of things often outside our control.
Right, like nature and nurture playing together.
Exactly. Our basic temperament, the wiring we're born with, and our early environment, especially those first relationships with caregivers.
That interplay is just fundamental, isn't it? How we're built meets what we experience early on. It shapes so much.
And this is where the idea of attachment styles from childhood comes in. It's really insightful. The book mentions Karen's work, highlighting how these early attachments can predict our adult relationship patterns.
Secure, avoidant, ambivalent. Those are the main ones.
Yeah, they give us a kind of framework, right, for understanding how those first connections set the stage.
Totally. Let's break them down a bit.
Okay, so secure attachment. This is kind of the ideal, maybe. The child feels okay seeking comfort when they're upset.
Yeah, and they trust the caregiver will actually be there.
They might get sad when the caregiver leaves, but they're happy and easily soothed when they come back.
And the key there really is the caregiver's attunement, consistently noticing and responding appropriately to the child's needs.
Attunement, like noticing a cry means hunger, or a reach needs comfort.
Exactly. That reliability builds fundamental trust, security.
Okay, then there's avoidant attachment. This sounds different, often linked to caregivers who might be rejecting, maybe even harsh.
Yeah. So the child learns, probably unconsciously, not to rely too much on that caregiver for comfort.
How does that look?
Well, interestingly, they might actually be quite clingy at home, but then when the caregiver returns after being gone, they act kind of indifferent, even if they were upset earlier.
Huh. It's like they've learned not to expect their needs to be met reliably.
Pretty much. They sort of stop seeking that reassurance actively. So if you're listening and find yourself hesitant to rely on others or maybe pushing people away,
Mm-hmm.
this early pattern could be echoing.
Right. Recognizing it is the first step.
Definitely.
And the third one, ambivalent attachment. This comes from, what, inconsistent caregiving? More chaotic?
Exactly. Unpredictable. So these kids often show a lot of obvious anxiety.
Okay.
Very clingy, maybe demanding. They get super distressed when the caregiver leaves.
Right.
But then, even when the caregiver comes back, they might still be upset, hard to console, still feeling anxious and uncertain.
Wow. So it really seems like that consistent positive care early on builds such an important foundation, self-reliance, trust.
Precisely. And when that attachment is insecure, avoidant, or ambivalent, it can lead to this basic feeling of being unsafe in relationships, being more easily overwhelmed by negative feelings.
Can affect other things later, like impulse control.
Yeah, it can have knock-on effects.
But the book also points out something really important, I think. Even kids who seem securely attached at first can still develop this fear of abandonment later on.
That's absolutely right. It's not always rooted in just those first few years.
So what else contributes?
Well, temperament plays a role again. Some people are just naturally more prone to anxiety.
Okay.
And then big life events later in childhood or adolescence can trigger it, like a parent dying, a difficult divorce, maybe a new step-parent who isn't as stable.
Right. Those things can shake your sense of security, even if things were good before.
Definitely. These later experiences can absolutely plant seeds of insecurity and fear of loss.
So it feels like those early negative experiences, the rejection and avoidant or the chaos and ambivalent, they really lay the groundwork for certain core beliefs about ourselves and others. And abandonment is a key one.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember how primal this fear is. As babies, we literally depend on caregivers for survival.
Life or death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So any insecurity in that first bond feels terrifying at a core level. It can overshadow everything and trigger those fight, flight, freeze responses even years later in adult relationships.
And temperament comes up again here too, right? Genetics can make someone more vulnerable to anxiety, maybe even borderline personality disorder.
Yes, and the book notes that BPD can often be intensified by unsafe environments and insecure attachment. And there's this mention of heightened sensitivity, too. People with BPD or highly sensitive persons, they might just feel things more intensely, sensory input, emotions.
Which could make those negative early experiences hit even harder.
Potentially, yes, making them more vulnerable to developing that fear of abandonment.
Okay, this all kind of leads us to Jeffrey Young's idea of early maladaptive schemas, or EMS. This sounds like a really central concept.
It really is. Young talks about EMS as these broad, pervasive patterns. They're made up of memories, strong emotions, core thoughts, even physical sensations.
No.
And they're all about how we see ourselves and how we expect others to treat us. They usually form in childhood or adolescence, get stronger over time.
And they cause problems later on?
Often, yeah. They're frequently at the root of difficulties in relationships and general well-being. Think of them like old scripts from childhood that we keep replaying even when they don't work anymore.
Got it. So from our early experiences in temperament, these schemas, these core beliefs develop. And the book highlights 5 that are closely tied to the fear of abandonment. Can we dig into those?
Sure. The 5 are abandonment itself, mistrust abuse, emotional deprivation, defectiveness, and failure. These shape how we see ourselves, expect others to act, and how we behave.
Let's really zoom in on the abandonment core belief first. What kinds of thoughts go along with that one?
Someone with this belief might often think things like, people I love will leave me or die, or no one's ever really been there for me consistently. There's this underlying feeling that people you get close to are just unreliable, unpredictable, and that in the end, you'll be alone.
The book uses Ava's story as an example. It sounds pretty powerful. Can you walk us through how her experiences shaped this belief?
Yeah, Ava's story is really poignant. She was raised by a single mom, never knew her dad. Early on, her mom had a boyfriend, Bob, who just disappeared. No explanation. Huge loss for little Ava. Then came Ross, who lived with them for years. But their relationship was full of intense fights, and Ross would just vanish unpredictably. Ava was constantly worried.
That sounds incredibly stressful for a child.
Totally. And her mom continued to have unstable relationships throughout Ava's childhood. So this pattern of important men coming and going, it just deeply ingrained that belief. People leave.
That repeated loss really hammers it home, doesn't it?
It really does. If you've had similar instability, you might find yourself expecting loss even in healthy relationships now. It can almost become self-fulfilling.
It's heartbreaking. And the book mentions how other core beliefs can kind of tangle up with this abandonment fear,
Mm.
like mistrust and abuse. How
Yeah.
does that connect?
Well, the mistrust abuse schema is basically expecting others to hurt you, cheat you, lie, take advantage.
Okay.
So someone with this is always on guard, anticipating betrayal. The book gives Courtney's example. Her parents were lovely in public, but verbally abusive privately. And nannies she bonded with kept leaving suddenly, without explanation. So she learned that people close to you might hurt you, mistrust, and that they disappear without warning, abandonment. The loss of the nannies reinforced that even seemingly caring people couldn't be counted on.
That inconsistency must have been so confusing and damaging. What about emotional deprivation? How does that feed into fearing being left?
Emotional deprivation is feeling your core needs for support, affection, understanding just weren't met in childhood.
Mhm.
Madeline's story illustrates this. Her mother was emotionally distant, couldn't even say, I love you at the end of her life. Her dad later dismissed her college acceptances.
Ouch.
So when you consistently feel emotionally unseen or unsupported by those closest, it creates this profound sense of being alone in your experience. That can easily bleed into a fear of being physically alone, too. It's like this constant ache for connection that was never filled.
Like a fundamental need going unmet.
Okay.
Next is defectiveness. How does feeling flawed connect to abandonment?
The defectiveness is that deep down belief that you're inherently bad, unworthy, that if people really knew you, they'd reject you.
Hmm.
Ali's story is the example here. Her parents' affection felt conditional. If she was too perfect, her mom and sister pulled away. If she made mistakes, her dad withdrew.
That sounds impossible.
Right. It created this constant feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with her, leading to a massive fear of being abandoned for just not being good enough. You fear they'll discover your flaws and leave.
Constantly walking on eggshells, fearing exposure and rejection. That sounds exhausting. Lastly, failure. How does that link up?
The failure belief is feeling inadequate, incompetent, like an imposter, even if you are successful.
Okay.
Leela felt she never measured up to her high-achieving parents' academic standards, despite going to a good school. Their love felt tied to her grades. They didn't even come to her graduation.
That's harsh.
Yeah. It reinforced her feeling of inadequacy and ultimately emotional abandonment for not meeting their standards. This connects to abandonment fear because you might believe you're just not capable of making a relationship work, so your partner will eventually get disappointed and leave for someone better.
It's really striking how all these different beliefs, while distinct, can all funnel into that same core fear of being left. It shows how complex these patterns are.
Exactly. And the point the book makes isn't about blame or getting stuck in the past.
Right.
It's about gaining self-awareness now. Understanding your inner landscape is the absolute first step towards tackling relationship challenges and making real positive changes.
Okay, so once we've explored these beliefs, the book suggests using self-assessment questionnaires to start identifying which ones might be active for you. Let's talk about how that starts, maybe focusing on the abandonment assessment first.
Sure. So the book gives you a list of statements for each core belief. You read them and rate how true each one feels for you on a scale, usually 1 to 6.
1 being not true at all, and 6 being describes me perfectly.
Exactly. For abandonment, the statements are about how stable or reliable you feel the important people in your life are. Do you worry they're emotionally unstable, unreliable, erratic, or just fear they'll die or leave you for someone else?
And there's a scoring system, right?
Yeah.
To give you a sense of how strong this belief might be for you, low, moderate, high.
Yes. You add up your scores for the abandonment statements, but, and this is really important, the book emphasizes that even if your total score is low,
Mm-hmm.
if you rated even one statement as a 5 or 6, like it really, really resonates, that strongly suggests this core belief is still a significant issue for you.
Ah, okay.
Wow.
So it's not just the total score. A single strong hit can be telling. The book uses Audrey's example for this, right?
Exactly. Audrey scored fairly low overall on abandonment, but she knew that feeling was a huge recurring theme in her life and relationships. Looking closer, she realized statements about her family being slow to respond to calls, making her feel like a low priority. Those hit home hard. It shows the assessments are useful tools, but you have to weigh them against your own felt experience.
That makes sense. Trust your gut, too. And the book also says these beliefs often work together, like co-conspirators.
Absolutely. One getting triggered can set off others. It's like a chain reaction.
Which is why there are assessments for the others, too. Mistrust abuse, emotional deprivation, defectiveness, failure.
Precisely. Same process. Read the statements, rate them 1 to 6.
Can you just quickly remind us what each of those other assessments focuses on?
Sure. Mistrust abuse looks at whether your upbringing lacked trust or safety, maybe involved abuse or betrayal.
Okay.
Emotional deprivation explores if you feel you didn't get enough emotional support, nurturing, empathy growing up.
Got it.
Defectiveness taps into that deep feeling of being inherently flawed or unlovable.
Hmm.
And failure assesses the belief that you're fundamentally incompetent or destined to fail.
And again, even if the score is low on any of these, you might still feel like it resonates.
Absolutely. The book gives examples of why that might be. Like, for mistrust, maybe there were big family secrets.
Huh? Uh,
For emotional deprivation, maybe feeling less loved than a sibling. For defectiveness, just
yeah.
always feeling different. For failure, maybe those super critical parents we talked about.
Right. And there are personal stories too, like Melissa recognizing her mistrust despite a low score.
Yeah, or Emily feeling defective even after lots of self-esteem work, or Ellen feeling like a failure despite success because of her parents' expectations.
It really comes back to trusting your own instincts alongside these tools.
Exactly. It's about that internal ping you might feel with a belief, regardless of the number.
So as people listen to this, what's the main takeaway from this section on core beliefs and self-assessment?
Really, it's an invitation to reflect. What came up for you as we talked? Any memories, feelings, patterns? It's about starting to notice how these deep beliefs might be playing out in your life and relationships right now. Just becoming aware. That's the crucial first step.
Okay, so just to quickly recap where we've gotten to in this deep dive. We've looked at where the fear of abandonment might come from early attachment temperament.
Mm-hmm.
We've introduced these core beliefs, especially the abandonment one, and talked about how self-assessment can be a starting point for identifying them in ourselves.
Exactly. How those early experiences lay the groundwork, and how these beliefs show up in our thoughts, feelings, behaviors today.
So next time, we'll continue digging into Michelle Skeen's work, looking at what she calls mind and relationship traps.
Yeah, and the behaviors, often unconscious, that actually keep these patterns going.
It sounds like understanding how we might accidentally be reinforcing the very things we want to change.
That's it, exactly. Or how we might be perpetuating the cycles we desperately want to break.
Okay, so as we wrap up for today, here's something to maybe mull over. Now that you have a bit more insight into where this fear might come from and how it shows up, what's one small thing you could do, maybe even today, to just become more aware of how it might be influencing your interactions, your choices in relationships?
Yeah, maybe just noticing or journaling a thought.
Could be as simple as that. Just observing your reactions in your next conversation with someone close. It could be really insightful.
And of course, if this has sparked something and you want to go deeper, the source itself is fantastic. Michelle Skeen's book, Love Me, Don't Leave Me, Overcoming Fear of Abandonment and Building Lasting Loving Relationships.
Highly recommended if this resonates.
Definitely a valuable resource for this journey of self-discovery.